Hello, friends. Have you ever felt that quiet pressure on a Sunday night when the weekend fades and the weight of bills, rent, and deadlines suddenly feels heavier than your own body? You lie there in the dim light of your room, scrolling through your banking app, watching the numbers shrink and wondering how the paycheck you worked so hard for vanished into groceries, gas, rent, and credit card minimums before you even had a chance to breathe. It's a familiar scene for millions of Americans, the silent stress of adulthood, the invisible tax of survival. And here's where I want you to lean in. This book explains how, where, when, and what shapes the way we carry these struggles. And to get complete insights, watch this video till the end, because every part builds on the last, and by the time we reach the conclusion, you'll see your own Sunday nights differently. This isn't hype, this isn't noise. It's one calm voice speaking to you, one listener, one human to another, in the quiet of your own room, reminding you that you are not alone in this struggle. Because the truth is, freedom doesn't start with money, it starts with the mind. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase the bills, it doesn't magically lower rent or gas prices, but it changes the way you carry them. Instead of drowning in the weight, you learn to breathe under it. Instead of letting survival define your life, you begin to see survival as the foundation, not the ceiling. And once you accept that, once you stop blaming yourself for the cost of living, you can begin to build something stronger, a mind that doesn't break under pressure, a spirit that doesn't collapse under bills, a life that isn't defined by scarcity, but by resilience. This video is a cinematic journey through the struggles we all face, student loans that feel like chains, credit cards that act like silent roommates, jobs that drain identity, Sunday nights that weigh heavier than Mondays, and the illusion of progress that keeps us chasing more money without more peace. We'll walk through each of these struggles, not to complain, but to uncover the philosophy hidden inside them, the lessons that can transform the way you see your own life. And by the end, you'll understand that the high-performing mind is not about grinding harder, it's about carrying life differently. So stay with me, let the words sink in, let the images paint the story, and together we'll explore how to turn quiet stress into quiet strength, how to turn burnout into clarity, how to turn debt into discipline, and how to turn confusion into freedom. This is the promise. If you watch this video until the end, you will learn not just how to survive, but how to live with resilience, clarity, and strength.
There is a particular kind of heaviness that arrives on Sunday nights, a weight that presses down quietly as the weekend fades and the week ahead looms like a mountain. And if you've ever felt it, you know it's not just about work. It's about the cycle of life itself, the endless repetition of bills, deadlines, and responsibilities that seem to reset every 7 days. You sit there in the fading light, maybe on the edge of your bed or at the kitchen table, and the silence feels louder than any noise, because in that silence, your mind begins to race. Emails waiting to be answered, meetings stacked back to back, rent due, groceries running low, gas tank nearly empty, credit card balance creeping higher, and the quiet dread that all of it will repeat again next week, and the week after, and the week after that. This is the Sunday night weight, the invisible burden that millions of people carry, the unspoken anxiety that comes not from one big crisis, but from the accumulation of small, relentless pressures. It's not just dread of work, though work plays its part. It's the fear of being stuck in a loop that never changes, the fear that life has become a treadmill where you run harder but never move forward. And here's the truth. This weight is not weakness. It's a signal, a reminder that the human mind was not built to carry endless cycles without pause, without reflection, without meaning. The Sunday night weight is the tax of burnout, the cost of living in a culture that glorifies productivity but forgets humanity, that tells you to hustle harder but never teaches you how to rest. And yet, there is a way to face it differently. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase the emails or the bills, but it changes the way you meet them. Instead of collapsing under the dread, you begin to see the pattern, to recognize that the weight is not permanent. It is a rhythm, and rhythms can be managed, can be carried, can even be transformed. Imagine approaching Sunday night not with fear, but with clarity, not with dread, but with discipline, not with anxiety, but with resilience. Imagine seeing the week ahead not as a mountain, but as a series of steps, each one manageable, each one survivable, each one an opportunity to practice strength. This is the shift. The Sunday night wait becomes not a curse, but a teacher, showing you where your boundaries are, where your energy leaks, where your priorities need to be realigned. And when you begin to carry Sunday nights differently, you begin to carry life differently. You stop seeing the week as a trap and start seeing it as a canvas, a place where your choices matter, where your discipline shapes your freedom, where your resilience builds your future. The Sunday night wait will always be there because life will always demand something of you, but it doesn't have to crush you. It doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to steal your peace. With a high-performing mind, Sunday nights become not the end of freedom, but the beginning of strength, not the collapse of joy, but the practice of resilience. And that is how you transform the quiet dread into quiet power, how you turn the weight into wisdom, how you reclaim your own life from the cycle of burnout.
Debt is like a silent roommate that never leaves, a presence that lives with you in every room, every decision, every quiet moment. And though it doesn't speak, its voice is always there, whispering reminders of what you owe, what you borrowed, what you've promised to pay back. You wake up in the morning, and before you even sip your coffee, the thought of debt is already in the background, shaping the way you plan your day, influencing the choices you make, deciding whether you can afford to go out, whether you can buy that new jacket, whether you can take that trip, whether you can even breathe freely. It's not just numbers on a statement, it's a shadow that follows you everywhere. Student loans, credit cards, car payments, mortgages. Each one is a roommate that takes up space in your mind, demanding rent in the form of stress, anxiety, and sleepless nights. And the cruelest part is that debt doesn't just take your money, it takes your peace. It sits with you at the dinner table when you're trying to enjoy a meal. It lies next to you at night when you're trying to sleep. It walks with you when you're trying to clear your head. Debt is not loud, it doesn't shout, but its silence is heavier than noise, because silence leaves room for imagination, for fear, for endless calculations of what if, what next, what happens if I can't pay. And here's the truth, debt is not just financial, it's psychological. It changes the way you see yourself, the way you see your future, the way you see your freedom. It makes you feel smaller, trapped, defined by numbers instead of dreams. But here's where the shift begins. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase debt, it doesn't magically pay off loans, but it changes the way you carry them. Instead of letting debt define your identity, you begin to see it as a challenge, a discipline, a teacher. Debt teaches patience, it teaches restraint, it teaches the value of choices. And when you carry debt differently, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of numbers and start seeing yourself as someone who can outlast them, someone who can build discipline, someone who can turn the silent roommate into a reminder of resilience. Because debt may live with you, but it doesn't have to own you. It may sit in your room, but it doesn't have to control your mind. And when you learn to carry debt with clarity, you begin to see opportunities where before there were only walls. You begin to notice that even in the shadow of debt, there is space for growth, for discipline, for strength. Debt is real, but so is the power of the mind. And that is how you transform the silent roommate into a silent teacher, how you turn the weight into wisdom, how you reclaim your own life from the shadow of numbers.
Burnout in the modern workplace is not just exhaustion, it is erosion, the slow wearing away of identity, energy, and hope. And if you've ever felt it, you know it's more than being tired. It's waking up with a heaviness that coffee cannot fix. It's dragging yourself through the motions of a job that once felt purposeful but now feels like a cage. It's sitting at your desk, staring at the screen while your mind drifts to the life you wish you had, the freedom you wish you could taste, the peace you wish you could hold. Burnout is the silent epidemic of our time, hidden behind productivity charts and performance reviews, disguised as dedication, rewarded with promotions. But inside, it feels like emptiness, like a hollowing out of the soul. You go to work, you answer emails, you attend meetings, you hit deadlines, and yet every day feels heavier than the last. Because the energy you spend never comes back, the hours you give never return, the identity you sacrifice never rebuilds. And here's the cruelest part: society glorifies it. Hustle culture tells you that exhaustion is noble, that sleepless nights are proof of ambition, that burnout is the price of success. But the truth is simpler. Burnout is not proof of strength, it is evidence of imbalance, of a life tilted too far toward work and too far away from meaning. And here's where the shift begins. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase deadlines, it doesn't cancel meetings, it doesn't magically transform your boss into a mentor, but it changes the way you carry the weight. Instead of collapsing under the pressure, you begin to see burnout as a signal, a warning light on the dashboard of your life, telling you that something needs to change. Burnout teaches boundaries, it teaches discipline, it teaches the value of rest. And when you carry burnout differently, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of the workplace and start seeing yourself as someone who can shape the way you work, someone who can protect your energy, someone who can build resilience even in the middle of exhaustion. Because burnout may live in the workplace, but it doesn't have to live in your mind. It may sit in your office, but it doesn't have to control your spirit. And when you learn to carry burnout with clarity, you begin to see opportunities where before there were only walls. You begin to notice that even in the shadow of exhaustion, there is space for growth, for discipline, for strength. Burnout is real, but so is the power of the mind. And that is how you transform the workplace from a cage into a classroom, how you turn exhaustion into wisdom, how you reclaim your own life from the shadow of endless work.
The illusion of progress is one of the most dangerous traps of modern life because it convinces you that you are moving forward when in reality you are running in circles, chasing numbers, chasing promotions, chasing possessions, chasing validation, and yet never arriving at peace, never arriving at freedom, never arriving at the life you imagined. You wake up, you go to work, you earn a paycheck, you pay the bills, you buy the groceries, you fill the gas tank, you pay down a little debt, and for a moment it feels like progress. But then the cycle resets, the bills return, the debt grows, the groceries run out, the gas tank empties, and you realize that what you thought was progress was only maintenance, survival disguised as advancement. Society tells you that more money, more possessions, more achievements equal progress, but the truth is simpler. Progress without peace is just motion. Progress without meaning is just noise. Progress without freedom is just another form of captivity. And here's the cruelest part. The illusion of progress is celebrated. Social media glorifies it, workplaces reward it, culture reinforces it, and yet inside you feel empty, because deep down you know that checking boxes is not the same as living, that climbing ladders is not the same as flying, that accumulating things is not the same as becoming whole. The illusion of progress steals your years, it steals your energy, it steals your identity, because you spend your life chasing goals that were never yours, milestones that were never meaningful, achievements that were never aligned with your spirit. And here's where the shift begins. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase the cycle. It doesn't magically free you from bills or responsibilities, but it changes the way you see progress. Instead of measuring progress by numbers, you begin to measure it by clarity, by resilience, by peace. progress becomes not about how much you earn, but about how much you grow, not about how many possessions you collect, but about how much freedom you create, not about how many boxes you check, but about how much meaning you live. And when you carry progress differently, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of cycles and start seeing yourself as someone who can shape the way you move, someone who can define progress on your own terms, someone who can build a life that is not an illusion, but a reality. Because progress may be celebrated by society, but it doesn't have to be defined by society. It may be measured by numbers, but it doesn't have to be limited to numbers. And when you learn to carry progress with clarity, you begin to see opportunities where before there were only walls. You begin to notice that even in the shadow of cycles, there is space for growth, for discipline, for strength. The illusion of progress is real, but so is the power of the mind. And that is how you transform progress from a trap into a truth, how you turn motion into meaning, how you reclaim your own life from the shadow of endless chasing.
Life is built on choices, and yet every choice carries a weight heavier than most people admit, because behind every decision, what to buy, where to live, which job to take, whether to spend or save, there is a hidden cost, a ripple effect that shapes not only your finances, but your peace, your freedom, your identity. You stand in the grocery store aisle staring at 2 brands of cereal, and it feels trivial. But behind that choice is the budget you're trying to stretch, the paycheck that already feels too small, the debt that waits at home, the rent that looms at the end of the month. You sit at your desk considering whether to stay in a job that drains you or risk leaving for something uncertain. And behind that choice is the fear of bills, the weight of responsibility, the anxiety of survival. Choices are not just decisions, they are crossroads, and each one carries the pressure of consequences. And here's the cruelest part. Society tells you that freedom is about having more choices, but the truth is simpler. Freedom is about carrying choices differently. Because too many choices without clarity become paralysis. Too many choices without discipline become chaos. Too many choices without resilience become regret. The weight of choices is the silent burden of adulthood, the invisible tax of responsibility, the quiet stress of knowing that every decision matters, that every step shapes the future, that every yes or no builds the life you will live. And yet, here's where the shift begins. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase the weight. It doesn't magically make choices easy, but it changes the way you carry them. Instead of drowning in indecision, you begin to see choices as opportunities, as teachers, as mirrors of your values. You begin to recognize that the weight is not punishment, it is proof of freedom, because to choose at all is to have power. To decide at all is to have agency. To carry the consequences at all is to be alive. And when you carry choices differently, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as someone who can shape the way you live, someone who can define priorities, someone who can build discipline even in the middle of uncertainty. Because choices may be heavy, but they don't have to crush you. They may be complex, but they don't have to paralyze you. They may be endless, but they don't have to overwhelm you. And when you learn to carry choices with clarity, you begin to see opportunities where before there were only walls. You begin to notice that even in the shadow of responsibility, there is space for growth, for discipline, for strength. The weight of choices is real, but so is the power of the mind. And that is how you transform decisions from burdens into blessings, how you turn crossroads into classrooms, how you reclaim your own life from the shadow of endless uncertainty.
Identity in the modern world comes with a price, a cost that is often invisible but always felt, because who you are is constantly measured against what you earn, what you own, what you achieve,
and what you display to others. From the moment you wake up and scroll through your phone, you are reminded that identity is no longer just about character or values. It is about brands, possessions, titles, and curated images. You see friends posting vacations, colleagues announcing promotions, influencers showcasing lifestyles, and somewhere deep inside you begin to wonder, who am I if I don't have those things, if I don't show those achievements, if I don't live that life? Identity becomes a currency, traded in likes, measured in salaries, defined by external validation. And here's the cruelest part. The more you chase identity through external measures, the more you lose the internal truth of who you are. You begin to shape yourself not around your values, but around expectations, not around your spirit, but around society's demands, not around your peace, but around performance. The price of identity is exhaustion, because you spend your life trying to prove yourself to others instead of living yourself for you. It is the quiet stress of pretending, the silent tax of comparison, the invisible burden of performance. And yet, here's where the shift begins. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase society's expectations. It doesn't silence the noise of comparison, but it changes the way you carry identity. Instead of defining yourself by what you own, you begin to define yourself by what you value. Instead of measuring yourself by external validation, you begin to measure yourself by internal peace. Instead of chasing identity as a currency, you begin to live identity as a truth. And when you carry identity differently, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop seeing yourself as a reflection of society and start seeing yourself as someone who can shape the way you live, someone who can define priorities, someone who can build discipline even in the middle of noise. Because identity may be expensive in the modern world, but it doesn't have to bankrupt your spirit. It may be measured by possessions, but it doesn't have to erase your values. It may be shaped by expectations, but it doesn't have to silence your truth. And when you learn to carry identity with clarity, you begin to see opportunities where before there were only walls. You begin to notice that even in the shadow of comparison, there is space for growth, for discipline, for strength. The price of identity is real, but so is the power of the mind. And that is how you transform identity into a compass, how you turn validation into vision, how you reclaim your own life from the shadow of endless performance.
Freedom is often imagined as the absence of rules, the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want. But the truth is that freedom without discipline is just another form of captivity. Because without boundaries, without clarity, without structure, freedom collapses into chaos, and chaos steals peace faster than any bill or debt ever could. Think about it. You dream of financial freedom, of waking up without the weight of rent or credit cards, of living without the Sunday night anxiety. But if you achieve that without discipline, you will spend recklessly, drift aimlessly, and eventually find yourself trapped again, not by bills, but by your own lack of control. The discipline of freedom is the paradox that makes life sustainable, because freedom is not about escaping responsibility, it is about carrying responsibility differently, with clarity, with strength, with resilience. Discipline is the invisible architecture of freedom, the structure that allows peace to exist, the boundaries that protect your energy, the habits that build your future. Without discipline, freedom is fragile. With discipline, freedom becomes unshakable. And here's the cruelest part. Society sells freedom as indulgence, as luxury, as escape. But the truth is simpler. Freedom is built in the small daily choices, in the restraint you practice, in the boundaries you set, in the habits you repeat. Freedom is not the absence of work, it is the presence of meaning. Freedom is not the absence of bills, it is the presence of clarity. Freedom is not the absence of discipline, it is the presence of resilience.
And here's where the shift begins. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase responsibilities. It doesn't magically cancel bills, but it changes the way you carry freedom. Instead of chasing indulgence, you begin to chase clarity. Instead of defining freedom as escape, you begin to define it as discipline. Instead of seeing boundaries as limitations, you begin to see them as protections. And when you carry freedom differently, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as someone who can shape the way you live, someone who can define priorities, someone who can build discipline even in the middle of abundance. Because freedom may be expensive, but it doesn't have to bankrupt your spirit. It may be measured by possessions, but it doesn't have to erase your values. It may be shaped by indulgence, but it doesn't have to silence your truth. And when you learn to carry freedom with discipline, you begin to see opportunities where before there were only walls. You begin to notice that even in the shadow of responsibility, there is space for growth, for clarity, for strength. The discipline of freedom is real, and so is the power of the mind. And that is how you transform freedom from indulgence into resilience, how you turn escape into empowerment, how you reclaim your own life from the shadow of chaos.
Resilience is like a mirror because when life presses against you with bills, deadlines, exhaustion, and doubt, what you see reflected back is not the struggle itself, but the strength you carry inside. And yet most people never realize that resilience is not something you are born with. It is something you build, something you practice, something you sharpen every time you face the weight of survival. Think about the moments when you felt crushed. Sunday nights heavy with anxiety, credit card bills stacked on the table, rent looming like a shadow, burnout draining your spirit, and yet somehow you kept going. Somehow you showed up. Somehow you carried the weight even when you thought you couldn't. That is resilience, the quiet strength that doesn't announce itself, the hidden power that doesn't need applause, the mirror that reflects back your ability to endure. And here's the truth. Resilience is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about facing the storm and still moving forward. It is about acknowledging the pain and still choosing discipline. It is about recognizing the weight and still carrying it with clarity. The mirror of resilience shows you who you are when life strips away comfort, when survival feels expensive, when freedom feels far away. It shows you that you are stronger than the numbers in your bank account, stronger than the deadlines on your calendar, stronger than the exhaustion in your body. And here's where the shift begins. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase the storms. It doesn't cancel the bills. It doesn't magically free you from debt, but it changes the way you see yourself in the mirror. Instead of seeing weakness, you begin to see strength. Instead of seeing failure, you begin to see endurance. Instead of seeing scarcity, you begin to see resilience. And when you carry resilience differently, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as someone who can shape the way you live, someone who can define priorities, someone who can build discipline even in the middle of chaos. Because resilience may be tested by life, but it doesn't have to break you. It may be challenged by bills, but it doesn't have to silence you. It may be strained by exhaustion, but it doesn't have to erase you. And when you learn to carry resilience with clarity, you begin to see opportunities where before there were only walls. You begin to notice that even in the shadow of struggle, there is space for growth, for discipline, for strength. The mirror of resilience is real, and so is the power of the mind. And that is how you transform reflection into revelation, how you turn endurance into empowerment, how you reclaim your own life from the shadow of endless struggle.
Clarity is the quiet power that most people overlook because in a world filled with noise, distractions, bills, deadlines, and endless responsibilities, clarity feels too simple, too quiet, too understated to matter. And yet, it is clarity that separates chaos from peace, confusion from direction, exhaustion from resilience. Think about the moments when your mind felt scattered. Sunday nights heavy with anxiety, credit card bills stacked on the table, rent looming like a shadow, burnout draining your spirit. And notice how much of that weight came not from the responsibilities themselves, but from the lack of clarity about how to carry them. When you don't know where your money is going, every dollar feels heavier. When you don't know what your priorities are, every choice feels paralyzing. When you don't know what your values are, every comparison feels crushing. Clarity is the lens that sharpens the blur, the compass that guides the storm, the quiet power that allows you to breathe even when life feels suffocating. And here's the truth. Clarity doesn't erase the bills, it doesn't cancel the debt, it doesn't magically free you from responsibilities, but it changes the way you carry them. Instead of drowning in confusion, you begin to see patterns. Instead of collapsing under chaos, you begin to see direction. Instead of being paralyzed by choices, you begin to see priorities. Clarity is not loud, it doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention, but its silence is stronger than noise, because silence leaves room for focus, for discipline, for resilience. And here's where the shift begins. Strengthening the mind doesn't erase confusion, but it teaches you how to cut through it. It teaches you how to ask the right questions. What matters? What doesn't? What builds? What destroys? It teaches you to see beyond the noise, beyond the distractions, beyond the illusions of progress. And when you carry clarity differently, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as someone who can shape the way you live, someone who can define priorities, someone who can build discipline even in the middle of chaos. Because clarity may be quiet, but it doesn't have to be weak. It may be simple, but it doesn't have to be small. It may be understated, but it doesn't have to be ignored. And when you learn to carry clarity with strength, you begin to see opportunities where before there were only walls. You begin to notice that even in the shadow of confusion, there is space for growth, for discipline, for resilience. The quiet power of clarity is real, and so is the power of the mind. And that is how you transform silence into strength, how you turn focus into freedom, how you reclaim your own life from the shadow of endless noise.
And now, as we reach the end of this journey, I want you to pause for a moment and remember where we began. That quiet Sunday night, the weight of bills, rent, groceries, gas, credit cards, and the silent anxiety that creeps in when the weekend fades and the week ahead looms like a mountain. We walked through the hidden cost of survival, the Sunday night weight, the silent roommate of debt, the burnout of the modern workplace, the illusion of progress, the weight of choices, the price of identity, the discipline of freedom, the mirror of resilience, and the quiet power of clarity. Each part was not just commentary, but a reflection of the struggles we all face, the invisible burdens that shape our lives, the silent pressures that define adulthood in America and beyond. And yet, through each part, we discovered something deeper, that the high-performing mind is not about grinding harder, it is about carrying life differently. It is about seeing survival not as a ceiling, but as a foundation. Seeing Sunday nights not as dread, but as discipline. Seeing debt not as a curse, but as a teacher. Seeing burnout not as weakness, but as a signal. Seeing progress not as illusion, but as meaning. Seeing choices not as paralysis, but as power. Seeing identity not as currency, but as compass. Seeing freedom not as indulgence, but as discipline. Seeing resilience not as survival alone, but as empowerment. And seeing clarity not as silence, but as strength. This is the transformation. The same struggles remain. The bills don't vanish. The rent doesn't shrink. The credit cards don't disappear. But the way you carry them changes. The way you see them shifts. The way you live with them evolves. And that shift is everything. Because when you carry life differently, you live differently, you breathe differently, you see differently. The high-performing mind is not about escaping reality. It is about embracing it with resilience, with clarity, with discipline, with strength. And so, as we close, I want you to remember this. You are not alone in your struggle. You are not defined by your bills. You are not trapped by your debt. You are not broken by your burnout. You are stronger than you think, more resilient than you know, more capable than you imagine. And if you carry this truth with you, if you practice it daily, if you let it sink into your spirit, you will begin to see your own life differently. Sunday nights will no longer be dread, but preparation. Bills will no longer be chains, but challenges. Debt will no longer be a shadow, but a teacher. Burnout will no longer be emptiness, but a signal. Progress will no longer be illusion, but meaning. Choices will no longer be paralysis, but power. Identity will no longer be currency, but compass. Freedom will no longer be indulgence, but discipline. Resilience will no longer be survival, but empowerment. And clarity will no longer be silence, but strength. This is the transformation. The same struggles remain. The bills don't vanish. The rent doesn't shrink. The credit cards don't disappear. But the way you carry them changes. The way you see them shifts. The way you live with them evolves. And that shift is everything. Because when you carry life differently, you live differently, you breathe differently, you see differently. The high-performing mind is not about escaping reality. It is about embracing it with resilience, with clarity, with discipline, with strength. And so, as we close, I want you to remember this. You are not alone in your struggle. You are not defined by your bills. You are not trapped by your debt. You are not broken by your burnout. You are stronger than you think, more resilient than you know, more capable than you imagine. And if you carry this truth with you, if you practice it daily, if you let it sink into your spirit, you will begin to see your own life differently. Sunday nights will no longer be dread, but preparation. Bills will no longer be chains, but challenges. Debt will no longer be a shadow, but a teacher. Burnout will no longer be emptiness, but a signal. Progress will no longer be illusion, but meaning. Choices will no longer be paralysis, but power. Identity will no longer be currency, but compass. Freedom will no longer be indulgence, but discipline. Resilience will no longer be survival, but empowerment. And clarity will no longer be silence, but strength.